Hello, everybody. This is Mike from Dimensional Walking, and today I would like to do a video on our Dulce Underground base, something I've had some of my own personal experience with and over the years. So I want to share some of that with you, and we're going to call this part one because I have quite a bit of material that I gathered when I lived in New Mexico for probably close to 15 years. So got involved and we'll go through it all. So anyways, here we go. So Dulce, New Mexico. Let's talk about Dulce itself a little bit. It's a beautiful little town and on the border between New Mexico and Colorado. And it's the home of the Hickory Apaches. It's the reservation. And it's probably the biggest town there, Dulce, New Mexico, on the reservation. So it's a beautiful place, a lot of strangeness, high strangeness going on there, always has been. And I think on most Indian reservations, there is high strangeness. It's kind of been my experience since I've worked with Native Americans in the past. I have a famous story. I'm not going to go into it, but when I worked in Albuquerque, I had Sitting Bull's great-grandson that worked for me, and I could tell you stories and stories about that, the many conversations I had with him. But I won't at this point. Maybe on the road, we'll see. Anyway, so Dulce, underground base. There's a lot of interesting, very interesting personalities, characters, you may call them, that have been involved with this whole underground base phenomena. Anyways, let's start with a few of them. One of the people I met along the way was Gabe Valdez. Gabe is a lovely person. I met him in probably 2008 at a meeting. I, of course, have told you in the past that I ran a group called the New Mexico Paranormal Forum in Albuquerque for many years. And when we started out, we called ourselves a little different. We call it MJ7. Because there were 7 of us, like-minded folks that were involved in UFOs, abductions, alien encounters, cattle mutilations. It ended up being the Dulce base, of course, and many other phenomena in that type of genre. So we met at different people's houses. So this one time we were meeting at one of the other members and homes, and all of a sudden there was Gabe Valdez there. Well, Gabe, come to find out, was a state trooper, or I guess state police officer for many years. He lived in the Dulce area. He was also a gaming commissioner, which would be dealing with the casinos here, the Native American, in this particular case, it would have been Native American casinos, including the casino that is up in Dulce, New Mexico. So he was involved, so he knew a lot of people. He knew lots and lots of people. And he did a lot of, some of the things he also did investigating on was cattle mutilations on kind of an official level there. And that was mainly around the Hickory Apache area and other parts of New Mexico. And he also on the side did UFOs and Dulce base investigations, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, so Gabe, Gabe helped a lot of investigators with what was good about Gabe, he was an investigator, plain and simple. And he was, again, a state patrol person or a state police officer. And so investigating was his livelihood, basically. So he would jump in the weeds and really get involved in these these different things, including paranormal type situations, etc. So Gabe Valdez, keep that in mind. His name will come up probably again and again. And again, one thing about Gabe, he's kind of a legend. I mean, you can probably go online and find a lot of material on Gabe. His son, Greg, is also was an investigator. When he was a lot younger, he used to go out with his dad and do the investigations with him, and develop over the years. It developed into a really good relationship. Greg actually wrote a book called The Dulce Base, which I highly recommend. And let me just mention here, Gabe died in 2011. I think it was in August of 2011. And probably about 30 days before that, Gabe approached me and offered to take me up to Archuleta Mountain and actually see one or two of the vents that led into the base as basically evidence or proof that the base did exist. Unfortunately, I hadn't made the arrangements with Gabe at that time before he died, so I wasn't able to do that. But anyways, it would have been a great experience, I'm sure. So that was Gabe Valdez, okay? And then, well, let's talk a little bit more about Gabe and some of the conclusions he came to in conversations I had and conversations he had with other people about his investigation of the Archuleta Mesa and Archuleta Mountain area. Now, I just want to kind of go through those real quickly. So Gabe had said that there was all these cattle mutilations, especially in the northern part of New Mexico, but all throughout the western United States. In fact, after my own personal investigation, I found out that it was pretty much all over Canada and the United States. There was these mutilations in pretty much all states that had cattle, grazing and cattle. And of course, a lot of that is in the western part of the US. So anyways, so one of the things he determined that the base was no longer, the underground base was no longer active. He felt that, was pretty confident of that. He also determined that the base was probably very similar to Area 51, where they had labs there. They probably were investigating or developing technologies, maybe even craft technologies there, because there was always these sightings of these UFOs, strange kind of UFOs coming out of the mountain area, Archuleta Mountain. And again, there was always this kind of, Gabe would always tell me, a lot of people thought the base was located on the mesa behind the town. In reality, he says it's actually on the mountain, which is next to the mesa, which is close. But everybody always say, "Oh, the mesa is where the base is." And he said it wasn't, period. And that's where he was going to take me. He was going to take me to Archuleta Mountain and look for those vents. Well, he knew where they were. He was just going to take me up there, which was a bit of a trek, I understand. And by the way, he had great relationships with the Hickory Apaches because he was part of the gaming business, and he had lived up there in that area for a long time. So he knew everybody, and he was able. The great thing about Gabe, he was able to go to these places on the mesa and on the mountain, and they would pretty much let him do that. Where anybody else coming up there, myself or anybody else coming there, especially a white guy coming up there and wandering around, that wouldn't work. You'd be quickly escorted off, I guarantee you, off the property, off of the reservation. So anyway, so he had that tremendous advantage, and that's what's gave him the ability to find out what he did. There's another person I'm going to mention. We're not going to go into it at this time. Maybe I'll bring it up in a video in the future. His name is Paul Bennewitz. Paul was a contractor, a high-tech contractor that worked for the government, and he lived and worked in Albuquerque, and he had a home, and his business was very close to Kirkland Air Force Base. So he interacted with that. He also, you can look him up online, Paul Bennewitz. He also had relationships with um, the Dulce Underground base. He had witnessed some crashes up there, possible UFO type crashes around the base, around Dulce, and he has a whole story that goes along with it. And he also apparently, story goes, he had intercepted some communications with, he thought it was aliens, communications between maybe Kirkland Air Force Base and aliens. He intercepted that. That became a huge controversy. And then the government got involved with it, and they were really watching him every step of the way. And I guess there was some concerns. He was right next to the base where he lived, et cetera, et cetera. So this kind of went on. I think there's at least been 2 books written on it. Pretty incredible stuff. Some of the people, Gabe Valdez, I believe, knew Paul, and there was some other people that I knew from my group that actually knew Paul Bennewitz. I never met him. I believe he had died before I was involved with that. I think he may have died mysteriously. Unlike Gabe, I think some people thought Gabe maybe had died, under strange circumstances, but my understanding from his son that he died quietly in his sleep. And I think when his son told me that, that kind of ended the strange possibilities that somebody had killed them, basically. But reality was who knows what he died, but he died in his sleep. So anyways, the Bennewitz, interesting guy. We could probably again do another full video on Paul Bennewitz. So that was somebody else I kind of want to just at least mention. So then I want to kind of read you a little bit of a posting I had done years ago. And I'm not going to, some of these people I'm going to give you names, real names, and some of the people I will not. Kind of protect some of their identities if need be. I'm very careful with that. So the next gentleman I will talk to you about, we'll call him Dr. Howard. We'll just call him Dr. Howard for now. So anyways, Dr. Howard came to our group meeting, and he, and this was when it was called the New Mexico UFO Paranormal Forum. And we used to meet at a kind of a recreational center that was within, I think, a mile of Kirkland Air Force Base. So we ended up, just a side note, we ended up getting all kinds of interesting folks sitting in our audience. Many of them we believe to this day were military, just watching us, just keeping an eye on it. And after a while, I even joked about it when I would get up and get the meeting started, et cetera, and introduce our speaker. I'd always joke about, oh, I see we have a few of those folks watching us from the base or wherever. I just kind of we all would laugh about it and kind of look around and see who I was possibly talking about. A couple of times, unfortunately, I don't know if it was a good thing, but 2 or 3 of these people I was talking about actually got up and left right after I mentioned that. So probably shouldn't have said that. After a while, I just stopped doing that. But they were still there. They always were still there. Many of them were different. They always weren't the same. And they were none of our group folks. Sometimes we would get, actually talking about the group real quickly, sometimes we get hundreds of people there. We had Travis Walton there. We had some great speakers from all over the country that would come there and speak in front of our audience. So anyway, so this gentleman, we'll call him Dr. Howard. Dr. Howard's, and I'm going to read a little bit of this. He did a meeting in October, and I can't remember exactly which year. I didn't write it down. But Dr. Howard had a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, and he was a college professor in Miami. So he had some pretty great credentials. He did research for 5 years in the Dulce area. His main focus was on strangeness, had been part of an area for many years. His research partner was the late, at this time, Gabe had died. The late Gabe Valdez, also a researcher and state patrolman. They first looked into the gas buggy project in the 1960s. The gas buggy was a government version of a nuclear detonation to free up natural gas reserves. And it really that's what the government told everybody, okay? And I don't think Gabe or Dr. Howard believed that, okay? So this was they thought, at least Dr. Howard did. I believe Gabe also had the same feeling that it could have been that this was a nuclear blast that was actually not only destroyed property, but also the lives and possibly some lives. But it was there to disrupt the alien base that was under the mountain. So what they're saying is this was kind of a cover up, this gas buggy project, and you can look up gas buggy and it'll tell you all about that, but it won't mention the alien part. But anyways, they thought it was possibly to interrupt the communication system of the aliens and maybe even kill them. You know, we're not sure if they did either one of them, etc. So anyways, the other thing Gabe and Dr. Howard did is they noticed a great deal, they looked at a great deal of symbols that were on the Archuleta Mesa and Archuleta Mountain. And some of the drawings had very reptilian type characteristics. And so I believe they took pictures of it. I've never seen any of the pictures, but I understand they're pretty cool pictures. These symbols they thought could have been used to warn or welcome air travelers, meaning UFOs that would come in there into the area. And it looked like they estimated, Dr. Howard estimated that some of these drawings could have been thousands of years old. So chances are that would mean that there has been a lot of activity going in and coming possibly into the mountain itself, which is where the underground base is now. Also, I should mention that probably there is a lot of places that are considered sacred sites up there. And these sites, as you probably know, if you know anything about sacred sites, are vortex type areas that can be used over and over again. Different cultures would use this particular spot because of its ability to have this vortex type property and actually can use it as a portal possibly to have ships come and go. So it's possible that's what Archuleta Mountain is. So one of the stories that Dr. Howard told was kind of an interesting story, and I'll share this with you. There was a woman in the Dulce area that had found an egg-shaped crystal on her property. The stone had some amazing properties. It could change colors and shapes through communication with people in its presence. The problem was the rock may have been trying to communicate with people and possibly brainwash them into doing something sinister. But at the time, very least, it felt uncomfortable in its presence. So I believe Gabe and Howard and a couple other people I knew, they actually were and actually saw it and touched it. And they all said the same thing. It didn't feel good. It was like it just made you feel kind of weird. And they didn't really like it. I think Howard, I remember he told me that was kind of his one and only time. I would have liked to have seen it. I would have liked to have at least felt that type of energy, but I didn't have anybody to take me to the woman. Apparently, I think as it goes on, let's see, eventually the woman buried the stone in her yard to protect it from being stolen. And the comment, there's also another comment here. These egg crystals have been found on other Indian reservations around the country. So anyways, I thought that was very interesting. That happened to be in the Dulce area again. And so anyways, that's the Dr. Howard story. Very interesting guy. I love the guy. He was a great speaker and we enjoyed his presentation. Okay, let's see, where are we going next? So then let's come down to a conference that was held in Dulce, New Mexico. And I want to, first of all, before we talk about the conference, I want to talk about somebody. We're just going to call this guy Mr. N. Okay. So Mr. N became a good friend of mine. He also was one of the founding members, MJ7 founding members of the group. Okay. Lovely person. He had actually, years before, in the 1990s, he had done protests at Area 51. He had brought a television crew there, a Japanese television crew, to Area 51, did interviews with Robert Lazard, and just did some really great investigative reporting of Area 51. After that, he moved to New Mexico and lived in New Mexico, and I befriended him at the group. He helped develop the group initially to what it is today. So anyways, bottom line was that we got the group going, and then in, I believe it was 2009, Mr. N decided he would like to do a Dulce Underground base conference. Well, let me give you there's a little bit of more background to this to make it interesting. And so before this, it was actually in the 90s, also 1990s, he had actually went up to Dulce with the same television crew from the Japanese network. And they actually got themselves in a little trouble in Dulce. They were kind of snooping around, and possibly the group, including himself, maybe not quite knowing how this whole thing works, being on a reservation, being a sovereign country, got themselves in a little trouble. And I guess they were retained or held kind of in custody for a while. I don't remember how long it was, but it was a little concerning for him and the television crew. And apparently caused a little bit of an international stir because they were being held by this Native American tribe, etc. And eventually they were released. I don't know if it was within the day, maybe. I don't think they stayed overnight, but it was several hours, let's put it that way. And so there was a little bit of bad taste, and both parties, both the Native Americans and the film crew and Mr. N himself, about the relationship there. But as the years went on after that, he built up a relationship with some of the council, the Native American of the Hickory Apache Council, and met the people and built his own relationship up. Well, probably about 10 years later, approximately, maybe it was 10 to 15 years later, he approached them in a proper way, approached them and said, hey, I want to do this underground base and et cetera. And I think that first they didn't really want to do it. And then he pretty much convinced them to do it. So anyways, so he, in March of 2009, he decides he's going to do this conference. And so anyways, so myself and a few other people in the group kind of helped. We gave him some assistance, got his stuff set up, and did a little, I guess, logistics, traffic control type, etc. So we came. I believe he got up there first, and we got up there shortly after, a group of us, about 5 or 6 people from the group. And so we stayed in a hotel that was part of the casino, and it was all good. Everything was good, and we talked to some of the people, etc., getting all kind of pumped up for the main event. One thing I will tell you, they had a nice restaurant there, and we went to eat. I think it was like a late lunch or early dinner on Saturday night. So I just got to tell you this because this sticks in my mind. There was a waitress there, and she seemed to be out of place. She didn't seem to be in the right place, and she wasn't a very good waitress at all, which seemed strange. It really did, because everybody else that was there was all Native American. This was a white person that had very pasty white skin. As a matter of fact, it's strange that would be kind of a woman in black kind of look to her, with kind of large eyes. It was quite strange. Nothing really else happened other than about a week later we had come back after the conference, and we asked about her, and they didn't know who she was or what the deal was with her. They denied she even existed. So that was kind of strange, and I always remember that was kind of the beginning of the strangeness there. So anyways, we had our dinner, and it was a good dinner, et cetera, et cetera. So we went to bed on Saturday night, And probably about 6 o'clock in the morning, we woke up to this tremendous whirling and swirling sound of a bunch of military helicopters. So, so they were swirling around. You could see them. They were kind of hovering above the hotel, and they flew around for a while, maybe about 10, 15 minutes, and they were really noisy. Okay, so kind of woke everybody up, probably in the hotel. So I think we got up shortly thereafter, and went to breakfast. And when we got downstairs to the breakfast, everybody was really upset with us. And they kept on, because we sort of thought, well, this is not, it's not we thought maybe this is some kind of maybe a military helicopter, something to do with medical or something. We didn't really grasp what was going on at this point. So when we got down there, everybody, all the Native Americans that were, in the hotel, either guests or also, people behind the counter, they were pretty upset with us because they kept on saying, well, you brought the military here. And they were, we didn't understand. We didn't know what they were talking about, but they assumed that because we were there giving this conference, or Mr. N was giving the conference because he was the front guy, that, it was our fault that this military was here, because they never have this. They said occasionally, I questioned a few of them, and occasionally they'll sail a helicopter at a distance, but not right over the town at all. Because this is a sovereign country. Basically the military aren't really welcome there per se. They're not, they just really don't want them. So anyways, they were pretty unhappy. And so we went ahead, as a Sunday now, went ahead and started setting up, and et cetera, et cetera. I got into the room that happened to be in there. And the crowd started coming. It was a very, very large crowd. And come to find out, we didn't think this was going to be a problem. They actually had limits on how many people could be in there. So somebody had either squealed on us to try to get us maybe to break up the meeting and not have it or something, because here comes the Native American fire marshal, and he says, you can't have it here. You just can't have it because you have too many people and blah, blah, blah. So it was getting to look a little strange, etc. So Mr. N approached me and said, Mike, would you go and find so-and-so who happened to be like the chairman of the tribe? And so I found him and told him the situation. He happened to be out in the lobby, told him the situation. And he said, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And he talked to the fire marshal. He wasn't going to budge at all, because we had a huge crowd, and on top of it, now we have had news people there. We had, cameras, we had everything there. So some people are getting pretty nervous at this point. So anyways, what happened was, he said, well, across the street or right next door, there's a grocery store that happens to have this huge conference area behind that we could go ahead and use, in which they said, sure, come on over. So this is a big place, and we couldn't believe it. I still understand why a grocery store would have such a big conference area behind it, but they did, which was great. So we moved the conference over there, and we got it all set up again. So that took us, maybe another 45 minutes to an hour to get set up. Everybody sat down, and we started the conference. It was a great conference. We had Native American people there. We had speakers from that had direct knowledge of Dulce base. Mr. N spoke. There's a bunch of really great speakers, and it went quite well. The only thing about it is a couple things happened, and I didn't mention this before, but there was several people in our party that were basically threatened that we had to leave and we weren't welcome here. Now, I have to tell you, most people that were there, most of the natives, were very friendly and very open and receptive to us meeting there or having this meeting. Anyways, I was threatened. I was even threatened once in the bathroom, which was pretty strange. They said that we'll do something really bad to you if you don't get out of here. It was just weird to have somebody threaten you in the bathroom. And they were going to take my camera away, and I wouldn't let them. And I thought for sure this is going to be bad. Well, somehow I talked my way out of it and got out of there and went back to the conference. It was kind of shook. One of the things I did notice about um, Mr. N, who is the person I was giving this presentation, was giving this conference basically, right about in the middle of it, he was looking strange. He did look like he was very upset. And I even came up to him and said, "So you were right?" And he said, "No, I'm fine." And which was not like him to be so short. But anyway, so something I felt there was something wrong. I personally think he was threatened also. He never admitted that. I asked him years later, actually, I asked him again years later if he was threatened. He said no. So anyways, the conference was over and we're kind of packing up and getting everything ready. I'm helping Mr. N load up his truck. I put stuff in the back. I put stuff in the on the passenger side. I'm telling you this where I put things and what I kind of touch because it's important. So I put stuff in the passenger side, etc. And he loaded up his truck and he takes off. So anyways, and I'll pick up this after the rest of the story. I'll pick up at the end something that happened to him later on. Anyways, so we're getting our stuff in our cars, and there were several of us that came up kind of together. And all of a sudden, in the parking lot of the hotel, we were kind of swarmed by a bunch of Native Americans that wanted to show us something. And there was probably 5 of them. Well, some wanted to show us things and some wanted to talk to us. Okay. And I think they all knew who we were. I mean, they all knew that we were kind of researchers, this, that, and the other. And let's face it, this is a Native American reservation, and we stood out fairly well, being white folks. Not saying that white folks didn't go to the reservation, but we did stand out. And they saw us at the conference, of course. So anyways, they kind of rushed us. It felt a little uncomfortable at first, but then when they started talking to us, it became comfortable. But some of the things they showed us were mind-boggling. They showed us pictures of creatures they claimed were creatures that were from the underground base. These were ones that were done experiments on. Some of them looked like half human, half cow. Some of them had hides like cows and faces like humans. And some had gills like fish. I mean, they were awful looking things. I'm going to tell you, it was hard to look at them. And there was several pictures like that. 2 different people brought similar pictures to us. And I really felt they were real pictures. At that time, and that would have been in the early, well, 2008, there really wasn't a lot of photoshopping being done at that point. And I didn't believe that they photoshopped. These look like regular photographs. They weren't online. They were actually photographs, and they looked very, very real. So all I can tell you is I think they were real. Now, another reason I think they were real is that they didn't want to sell them to us. They surely weren't going to give them to us. They wanted them, but they wanted to have us see them to give us some proof. Also, there was several of them told us stories about encounters they had, people that were in their vehicles that suddenly, they were stopped by military, or they were like taken up by UFOs, all kinds of other encounters, Sasquatch, Bigfoot encounters. This went on for probably almost a couple hours of conversation with them in the parking lot when we were trying to leave. So that was really fascinating. Also, one of them came up to us and they were talking about the helicopters, and they said that they had saw the helicopters come down close enough that it looked like they were taking photographs of all the cars that were in the parking lot, of the license plates. Now, I can't confirm that, but that's what they said. And, it sounded like those helicopters came very, very low. So I think it's possible. So going back to Dr. N, or I'm sorry, he wasn't Dr. N, it was Mr. N. So Mr. N was a friend, of course, of mine. So I kind of kept up with him. So I didn't hear from him for geez, I think it was probably several weeks. So I gave him a call and says, hey, what's going on? He said, oh man, I just really something was terrible. Something happened to me. I've been in bed. I can't get out of bed. Part of my body's been paralyzed. Something is really, really wrong. And so I said, take care of yourself. Can I come over and see you? Blah, blah, blah. He said, no, 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 please don't come over. So anyways, I didn't. And so several weeks later, I called him back again. How you doing? He said, well, I'm better, but wow, that was terrible. I don't know what happened. He said, as soon as I had gotten home from the conference, I started feeling really sick and dizzy, and then parts of my body seemed to become paralyzed. He said it was really, really terrible. He said it may have even started while I was there. He doesn't know, but definitely once he got in his car, he really started feeling bad. So anyways, we didn't really know about it. Finally, probably after a year, I think it was, he finally got 100% over whatever happened. So probably 2 years later, I was talking to one of my friends who was a black ops guy, and I was telling him the story about this Mr. N and him become partially paralyzed and sick and all this stuff after that. He said what he thought it could have been, and he questioned me very thoroughly on how did I put the stuff in the car, because I had no problems. I wasn't sick. I wasn't anything. And what did you touch and all this stuff? Because what he told me is that sometimes the government agents sometimes will put toxic, I guess, neurotoxin type agents, and they can just wipe it on things. And he said that most likely he believes that somebody wiped it on the door handle in the driver's side because they knew that was his vehicle. And I was probably lucky because I never touched his side. I touched the other sides, but not his side. And I touched the back to open up the back of his truck to put stuff in it. So he thinks some agent was maybe wiped on there. He touched in his hand. That's all it takes. Once that nerve agent gets on there, he said like VX or something like that. He said if you get too much on it, it'll kill you. And if you get just not enough, it'll make you really sick and paralyze you and do all kinds of strange stuff to you for quite a while. And to me, that's exactly what possibly happened. So, was it a warning? I would hope it would have been only a warning, and they weren't trying to do something worse than a warning. So anyways, so that was that story. It seemed to change Mr. N's attitude about some of these things, about UFOs and all the things that he'd been studying. He seemed to be trying to debunk some of those things that he used to talk about and say over the years. So I don't know if that event changed all that. I know eventually I think he did get involved, stay involved with Dulce, and I know he's still involved with UFOs, etc. After all these years. So anyways, let's see, is there anything else? I think that's it for now. I think we'll consider that part one. Dulce is a fascinating subject. Like I said, there's more to it. There's all kinds of, there's been several books written on it. I think it's real. I think there is a base there. I think I nearly got to see some real evidence of it, because Gabe was going to take me there if I wanted to, and I probably should have took him up on it quickly, but I didn't. But anyways, it's pretty amazing. And when those Native American people came to us and showed us those things, it was, to me, was the kind of a smoking gun that there was something going on there. And so anyways, that's it. I thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can send us an email to dimensionalwalking@gmail.com. Leave us a comment. Please subscribe. We need subscribers. We're new, and we want to build up our site. Leave us a comment. Leave us a like. All those wonderful things. So, anyways, thank you very much, and we'll see you again in the future. Thank you. Bye.